In this video, I want to explore the difference between functions and objects. At the same time, we'll learn a little about how PHP handles dates and time. This is the documentation for the PHP date function in the online manual. As it explains at the top of the page, it formats a local date or time, and in the description, we can see that the first argument to the date function is a format string. The second argument is optional, but the default is to call another function which is called time. This returns a timestamp for the current date and time. Timestamps measure the number of seconds that have elapsed since midnight Universal Coordinated Time at the beginning of January the 1st, 1970. And that's how computers work with dates and time. They always work in seconds. And if we scroll down, there's a list of the format characters that can be used in the first argument to the date function. So, for example, a lowercase l gives you a full textual representation of the day of the week in English, Sunday through Saturday. So let's try that out. I'm going to switch to my editing program, and I've got a blank page here. I'm simply going to echo date and then pass it a format string. The format string can also contain other characters. So I'm going to have lowercase l, comma, space, uppercase F, lowercase j, another comma, and an uppercase Y. And although that looks terribly mysterious, if we save that and load it into a browser, you now know the date on which I recorded this video. Of course, when you run the same script, it will show the current date for you. Now, if I want to find out which day of the week Christmas falls on in 2016, I need to use another function to create a timestamp for that date. So let's go back to the editing program, and I'm going to add in an extra line at the top here. I'm going to capture that timestamp as Christmas 2016. And there are several functions that are capable of creating a timestamp. I'm going to use string to time, which converts most English date formats to a timestamp. So str to time, then a string, dec 25 2016. That will give me the timestamp, which I can now pass as the second argument to the date function. So if we save that and reload the browser, we now know that Christmas in 2016 is a Sunday. To find that out, we needed to use two different functions, date and string to time. Let's see how that compares with the datetime class. I've got the datetime class documentation here, and at the top it says that it is a representation of date and time. So unlike the date function, it's not just for formatting a date. And if we scroll down, we see that the class has a large number of constants. It's also got many methods. This one here, the add method, can be used to calculate a new date by adding a specific date interval. The setTimeZone method can change the time zone of the datetime object. Unlike the date function, which deals only with the local date or time, the datetime class is aware of different time zones, and the format method can be used to display the date or time. So let's use the datetime class. Let's go back to the editing program, and I'm going to comment out these two lines and then create an instance of the class. I'm going to call it date1. Then we need the new keyword and datetime. And if I don't pass any arguments to it, that will give me a datetime object for the current date and time according to the server's time zone. So I'm just going to duplicate that and have another one as date2. So they've both got the same date and time, but they're completely independent of each other. So let's change the time zone for one of them. To change the time zone, you first need to create a date time zone object. Let's set it to the west coast of the United States, where lynda.com has its headquarters. So I'll call it West Coast. Then the new operator and date time zone. And we need to pass that as an argument, a string of a time zone identifier. For the west coast of the United States, it's America / Los underscore Angeles. And we can now set date 2 to the west coast of the United States. So date 2, the arrow operator, set time zone, and then we pass it our date time zone object, west coast. So let's see the time difference between where I am in London and the folks at lynda.com in sunny California. So echo, and then date 1 for me, and use the format method. And this takes as its argument exactly the same formatting characters as the date function. I'm going to add in the time, so lowercase g, colon, lowercase ia, then a comma, and then the rest of the format will be the same as before. Then duplicate that line and set the second one to date 2. So if I save that and then load it into a browser, it's 6:35 p.m. where I am in London, but it's only 10:35 a.m. in California at lynda.com. So it's early evening for me and mid-morning for them. Using PHP objects is very similar to working with ordinary functions and variables. The main difference is that a function is capable of performing only a single task. When you create an object from a class, the object has access to all of the class's methods. Many objects can also store values as properties. You create an instance of a class, in other words an object, with the new keyword, as I've done here, so new date time and new date time zone, and you store the object in an ordinary variable. Once created, the object accesses its methods and properties using the arrow operator, so that's a hyphen followed immediately by an angle bracket or a greater than symbol.